Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Dallin Malm, and this is the Momentum Theory Podcast. This show features conversations with athletes, artists, and entrepreneurs who are committed to mastering their craft, not for the sake of mastery itself, but to better magnify their talents and serve those around them. My guest today has had a lifelong passion for understanding how great organizations work. He earned his PhD in organizational studies at just 27 years old and started teaching executive MBAs at the University of North Carolina. He then stepped out to build first a consulting firm, then a frozen dessert company with his wife called Golden Swirl. In 1986, it started as two small shops in Salt Lake City and grew to over 60 locations across the Western United States just 10 years later. They successfully sold the company to an international conglomerate, and my guest found his way in new business ventures and teaching opportunities. Back in academia, he's built the entrepreneurship program at Utah State University from scratch, including a nationally awarded program called SEED, which utilizes student volunteers to teach third world entrepreneurs business skills and techniques. In this episode, you'll hear his philosophy and strategy behind his early success, why he delayed franchising, how he validated opportunities that came his way. We also cover how to design a life around meaningful work, why money-first founders rarely win, and why relationships and emotional health compound results. Please enjoy my conversation with Michael Glauser.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
You ask, what is our aim? Victory. Victory, however long and hard the road may be.
This will be remembered forever as the greatest day in the history of the Tour de France. Do you believe in miracles? Yes!
Let's start by talking about this section in your early career where you've got your undergraduate and a graduate degree. Now you're working in North Carolina, teaching an executive level course to people that are 10 to 20 years your senior. What did a 27-year-old Mike Glauser, what business did he have teaching people that old about business?
Well, I went straight through school. I did a bachelor's, master's, and PhD, and I was 27 years old when I graduated. I took a job at the University of North Carolina teaching in the business school. I was teaching in the executive MBA program, so these were older managers and executives of industry, much older than I was. I'd studied organizations, I'd taught about organizations, I'd consulted with a few, but I'd never built anything. And so I was a little self-conscious, had a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I thought early on that I'm going to leave academics at some point and I'm going to go build one or more businesses and prove that I can do it, see if I can practice what I'm preaching, and then come back with, a much broader skill set to help others build businesses. And so that's what I did. I was at the University of North Carolina there for 2 years, and then I went and did a leave of absence in Saudi Arabia at the University of Petroleum and Minerals. And I came back, and my first business I started was a consulting firm.
And what were the key lessons that you took from your time teaching? Maybe things that were taught to you or something that you came to discover that had a big impact on starting your own business?
Well, I'd always wanted to own something. I thought at some period I would do it. But when I realized I lacked that experience as a university professor, I knew a lot about the literature and the theories and all the research about organizations, but I just never had the real world experience. And so I decided to do it probably sooner than later as a result of that experience teaching those first classes. And I just really wanted to have practical experience that I could combine with academic training and be just a stronger thought leader in that field of, entrepreneurship and business development.
Do you recommend that path for students now? They ought to start at university before going into entrepreneurship to build a foundation or a network? Or has your thoughts changed on that over time?
No, I think there's lots of ways to do that. I think that young people are really, really savvy with social media and a lot of products. And if they can create something while they're in school or right after school and they prove it to be sustainable, they ought to go ahead and build it. If they don't have an idea that's viable, they've tried a few and they're not working, then to go get a job in an industry that you love. If you love the medical field, go get a job in, the medical field. If you love marketing, get a marketing job. If you love manufacturing, get a manufacturing job. And then really keep your eyes and ears open and look for problems and niches that are not being met, and develop your concept while you're working in the industry that you're working in. That tends to work the best. The research is pretty clear that the most successful entrepreneurs have either worked in the industry or they're serious users of the products. We call those user entrepreneurs, and they're actually very successful. If you use products and you know who makes the best products and which ones don't work and what's missing, and you start tinkering around and you come up with a solution or a better problem, you can do that while you're still working with an organization, and then launch that business after you've proven and vetted that model.
Well, you mentioned that when you were teaching that you had felt that imposter syndrome a little bit. You had had bigger goals kind of from the get-go, but when you were there, that feeling was pretty prominent. I think that seems to be a common thread with a lot of people. And for you specifically, that had to have been a good muscle to develop a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can reach any level of success and not feel some of that imposter syndrome. And so maybe that early exercise, you said you were 27, right?
When I finished my PhD at 27.
Yeah. I mean, that had to have been a critical characteristic, a critical skill that you had developed. I'll put it this way, a big barrier that you overcame when starting your own business, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was pretty confident I could do something. I wasn't sure what it was. And so the first thing is I helped start a consulting firm because I'd been doing that. And so that wasn't too hard to do. And that was a successful practice. But I kind of felt like I was like a dentist. I was only making money if I was on my feet drilling teeth. There was no equity in my consulting firm. It was me. And so I wanted to create a product-based business. And my wife's training is in nutrition and fitness and health education. And we thought, can we combine her skills and my skills, her skills in the field of nutrition, my skills in the field of scaling and building organizations, and build something that would create equity and have value long term, whether I was working there or not. And so that was the second move we did. And that was just a fun 10-year ride. It was awesome.
And that takes us into the world of Golden Swirl, correct?
Yes.
So you're teaching, you're consulting, you move into this field. I want to delve into a couple of parts of this, some key aspects of running a business and working with a co-founder and applying innovative solutions to it in entering a new industry. Tell me what it's like working with a co-founder, specifically in your case, your wife.
Well, my wife's been one of the best partners I've ever had. She was the first distribution manager. She was the first accountant. She was the first marketing director. And we ran the business out of our home. I was still working at the consulting firm, so we didn't have to take a hit in income as a family. And she was working for free. And I came home one day and all the keys to the stores were on the table. And she said, I'm done. I'm ready to raise these kids of ours, and you're going to have to take over. And the income was such that I could do that. But really a key was that we found some incredible partners that knew what we did not know. So they knew financing ventures, they knew real estate, and they came into the business pretty early on and really helped us build a really strong base of the company. And this is kind of an interesting story. I didn't want to give up ownership and lose control at that time. So what we agreed to do is they needed passive income, these investors. So we created a separate leasing company. And the leasing company built the stores and provided the inventory. And then we had an agreement that every store they built, they would get a guaranteed 7% annual return, no matter what, or 30% of the net income. And they ended up getting 30% of the net income in the first 10 stores or so. And then we were able to build with cash flow after that. We had such a strong business. Every store was producing a tremendous amount of cash. It was a cash business. And so we started building stores with cash, and they came to me and said, hey, Mike, we've helped you get started. What if we convert these leases on these initial stores to equity now at a different valuation? And so we converted the investment they had made for 20% of the company and eliminated every dollar of debt from the business at that point. And then we build it from there just with cash flow.
And how many years along is the business at that point?
I think we had 10 stores, and it was 2 years old when we converted the debt we owed to them to 20% of the company. So, I still had a major interest and controlling interest in the business.
Sure. But these were all direct to consumer. These are like storefront locations.
Yes.
Where customers come in and they're buying the frozen yogurt.
Right. The first wave, the first division of the company was a retail business. And the challenge, every time we could make money by building more stores, but it costs a couple $100,000 to build a store. So if you value a company, you have to discount it based on the cost of capital. And so someone could buy it and grow it, but they had to continue to spend extreme amounts of capital to build it. A couple $1 million to build, 8 or 10 more stores.
Yeah.
And so then what happened is I got some phone calls continually from companies saying, can we use your product in our chain of restaurants? Can we use your product in our C stores? And, Maverick Country Stores called me and Hardee's Hamburgers called me. And I said, no, it's a proprietary product, Golden Swirl. We're not giving it to the public. And I sat down one day and realized that the initial cash flow from those two clients would be $500,000 from year one. And so we thought, how could we do this? And it solved a couple problems. We were able to create a different brand called Northern Lights and offer them the new brand in a new box. And now we didn't have to spend capital to grow the company because we could grow the wholesale side in tandem with the retail side, and I could put the profit wherever I wanted, in the retail or the wholesale. And so we built a very large wholesale company. We had about 2,000 accounts when we sold the business. And so we went from retail to wholesale, and that was what was attractive to the buyer. They wanted the cash flow from the wholesale business. They didn't really want the stores as much, but I wasn't going to sell the wholesale business separately. So they bought the entire company.
What was the key to growing the retail side? Because that's, from the outside, it appears to be the lowest barrier to entry. That's where you see the most kind of stores pop up. But growing at scale like that is really special. I don't know if it was a factor of the times, or what were the ingredients that you had to put together to make that a success? Was it just you out hustled competitors, or perhaps the space was different at the time?
We did a couple of things differently. We created a premium product in the market, and it was objectively tested. It wasn't just our bias. We would create products in the lab. We would then take them to our customers as partners. We had a group of customers as partners that evaluated all of our products, and we would give them samples of all of our competitors' products and our products until we won those taste tests by 70% of the vote. We never went to production. And we could go into any market and say, bring us all the products. We'll put ours in there. You test them, and we guarantee ours will be the preferred product. So we were very vigilant in product development, number one. Number two is we didn't franchise, so we didn't have that heavy cost structure of franchise fees, overrides on products and supplies. So we were very lean. And then we would only go into markets where we could dominate that market. We'd go into a market and build a couple large showpiece stores and then backfill the market with smaller grocery store kiosks. And so we might have 10 stores in Las Vegas, and, I think we had 12 in Phoenix, and we had 6 in New Mexico, and we ended up with 30 in California. We had tremendous economies of scale where a lot of people, the franchise, they put a store in Oregon and they put a store in Florida and one in Michigan. And so we would dominate every market we were in. We were number 1 or 2 in every market. And so when buyers came knocking, we were really attractive to them.
For sure.
We had 3 buyers show up. We never advertised the company for sale. And within 1 year, we had 3 buyers show up.
Wow.
That made offers on the company.
So a key takeaway, you focus on the quality of the product. The product itself was a customer preferred product, but more than just getting people to like it, you have to get them to come into the front door. How did you get people to actually come to your locations? What was the PR or marketing?
So, at the time, this was, early on, they were still doing billboard marketing and radio and marketing. Social media was just starting to develop. And we looked at the costs of doing radio and TV and billboards, and it was really excessive. And we thought, if we took that same amount of money and just gave away free products, could we build a bigger business for less money? And so we would open a store and say, everything in the store is free on Friday night. We'd do a soft opening for a week or 2, put banners up, free product Friday night, come join us. And thousands of people would show up, and the media would show up. And they would put the frenzy on the news. Hey, this store, look what they're doing here. It's amazing. And then we would go to schools and give away free products. We'd go to races. We'd go to bicycle events, marathons. We were constantly giving away free product. And so our number one marketing tool was to give away the product, get it in people's mouths. And then once we built the big stores, the showpiece stores that were destination stores, people had to drive to those. So they had to really want the product. Then we would put them in grocery stores where there were thousands of people a day walking in and out of the front door.
Yep.
And they were not destination stores. They would see it and buy it.
Like it was a storefront?
Yeah,
Like
we
they
would
go like a Subway at a Walmart.
Yeah. We would put small kiosks in Smith's grocery stores, in Lynn's grocery stores, in a number of grocery stores. They would give us 200 or 300 square feet. We would put a small store in there. We would pay them a percentage rent, and they made money without having to do one thing.
All of this is public. Like any of your competitors could be walking down the street, going to the grocery store. Did anybody try to copy you?
Oh, yeah.
So why didn't it work for them?
So that's a key to being success in business, and this is what we teach, is that, you are always going to have competitors. You're going to have direct competitors. You're going to have copycat competitors. You're going to have indirect competitors, substitute products, other ways to meet the need. And if you think you're the hottest thing and the only one, and you develop this large ego, you're gonna fail. But if you know that we have to be the best, we have to be thinking right now where we're going to be in 2 years and where we're going to be in 5 years, and what's the next iteration of innovation, and how can we be the ones to do that? How can we be the best product in the market with the low cost structure? And you just have to constantly be scrambling and thinking and innovating and changing and pivoting. And you can't ever block out a competition.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to compete, you're not going to survive.
Sure.
You just have to be better.
Yeah. The founder of the Four Seasons, Isidore Sharp, he talks about times where he talks about excellence is the capacity to take pain. And specifically with entrepreneurship, he recalled many nights where he would wake up in just a cold sweat, couldn't go back to sleep. In the book, Eric Berger's book Liftoff, where he talks about the early days of SpaceX, he's interviewing one of Elon's. I don't know if it was his wife or his girlfriend at the time, but she talks about how he'd wake up in the middle of the night just screaming, like just tormented with the stress of his job. And so in this aspect, I don't think we're not talking necessarily about building rockets and competing against governments and other agencies, but that feeling of pressure and the need to perform, the principles are still the same. And that stress that you felt was very real. Can you think of a time when you were having one of those moments where it was testing your capacity to take pain, and how did you get out of it?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty much the story of building a business. There's many of those. But if you love what you're doing and you're passionate about it and you have a strong purpose for doing it, you get up in the morning and it's not that hard and it's not that painful. You just have to figure it out. You have to keep thinking and scrambling, and you have to be a great problem solver and a forward thinker. And, we had times where we'd build stores and they would just keep we'd be growing 50 to 100%. And as you get bigger, it's harder to grow at that level. And then same store sales would level off. And then they'd even start dropping. And so what do you do? How do you bring more people into those stores? And we were fortunate because everyone in the specialty food industry, the growth model tends to be to franchise. You can build corporate-owned stores. The next level is you license your brand, and the top level is you franchise. And most people franchise because it's kind of a poor company's way to expand. You don't have to spend the capital. You charge people a fee, so you're making money.
It's so appealing from the outside.
Yeah, and so people want to open those franchises, but what happens is you charge them, say 5 or 6% in a franchise fee and 3-4% in a marketing fee, and then you charge them an upright on the products. You add money to the products and the supplies they have to buy, and you're bilking them to death. And so if I'm paying, let's say my margin's 20%, my net income's 20%, but my franchise fee is 10%, then that franchisor is taking half of the profits out of that business for obviously providing some services, but they're not able to withstand changes in the market. Our stores could decline in sales and still make money, where a franchise store had very little leeway to drop in sales and still be able to be profitable. And so most of the chains that had franchised just had a lot harder time dealing with the change in markets for specialty food products. Specialty food products I've seen about a 5 to 10 year life. We had sweet roll shops, and we've had tea houses, and we've had smoothie shops and yogurt stores and cupcakes. And they don't have a long life. If you're building one of those, that you have to build it either then reinvent it or sell it or something. It's not going to last forever.
So what's the counsel that you would have for companies? Like, you've got two really successful franchise, you've got multiple, but two that come top of mind, especially in the food industry, that come out of Utah State: Crispy Cones and then of course Crumble Cookies.
Right.
They're on different levels in their growth right now. Crispy Cones is probably a little more applicable because they're in the the first half of their business life still, I'd say. What counsel would you give to them on sustaining their growth and expanding wisely based on your experience?
I think the model that we follow, they have to have a fabulous product which both of those companies do. They have a superior product that people love, and everyone knows their product's better than the competitors. And then I think it's real important to build some corporate stores first and really nail it and scale it before you scale it. I mean, I've seen people build one store and then franchise 30 stores. And we had almost 80 stores and didn't ever franchise.
Wow.
And so we had completely perfected the product development system. We'd perfected the site locations. We had perfected the training system, the hiring and training, and the local store marketing. I mean, we really knew what we were doing before we handed it off and charged other people excessive fees to be able to duplicate our model. And so I'd say franchising too early is a challenge. You got to continue to innovate. You got to continue to come up with innovative ways to market. You have to pay attention to timing. I've seen some companies get really attractive offers and they say, oh no, we're going to build it a lot bigger. And then 5 years later, it's not worth as much as what the offer was. So timing is critical.
That would be a horrible situation to be in. For people who are starting out, you do a lot of work with college students. Right now, you have built the Entrepreneurship Center at Utah State. You just dedicated in a beautiful new building. You've been going on for how many years now has it been? Like 9 years?
So I've been at Utah State 15 years.
15 years with the entrepreneurship program.
Yeah.
So there's a wide variety of motivation for going into business. The one that people are always tongue-in-cheek about are money. And what would you say to somebody whose goal in starting a business, there's probably multiple goals, but what it really comes down to is, I just really want to make money. What would you say to that young student?
I'd say most of those businesses don't survive. When I went back to academics after building some companies, I was quite surprised that what was being taught was nothing like what I had done as an entrepreneur. It wasn't real practical. It was kind of academic. It was theory and research based, and it was taught by professors of management and strategy that never built any companies. So we started what I call the Oral History Project. We started interviewing entrepreneurs and having them tell us their stories from the minute they conceive their idea until they build a successful, sustainable business. And so we collected this gigantic database of oral histories. And it's interesting that as we go back through that database, only about 3% of those successful companies said that money was their main motivation. So 3 out of 100. They knew they needed to make money and they wanted to make money. Money isn't bad. You have to have money to survive. But there was a deeper, driving, engaging passion. They wanted to be their own boss. They wanted to create their own company. They wanted to solve a problem in the industry. They loved their industry. They loved their new product. They wanted to create jobs for family members or for their small town that they lived in. They wanted to create and innovate, and there was something driving them that was much more powerful. If money's the only reason, businesses are so hard to start and so hard to scale that if making money is the only reason, they usually don't continue with the crisis of keeping it going.
Do you feel like that's some of the big takeaways that people will get from a university program, is learning how to model and get excited about the money and the projections and the growth, when there should be a bigger emphasis on do something meaningful to you, that's creative, that's productive?
Yeah.
Money comes as a result of service versus you should work towards the end goal of achieving an X dollar amount or whatever.
Well, people often say, do what you love and the money will come. And I don't think that's really true. You do what you love, but you have to do it really, really well. You have to be really good. You have to be really good at it.
Yeah.
You have to be the best and you have to love it. And then the money will come.
It pushes it past passion and into like an exercise. It can be something that you're good at, but it is still going to be very demanding. Some people will say, like, I've never worked a day in my life. And I genuinely believe people who they are in love with their craft and it feels like that's what they want to spend their time doing. but they wouldn't dismiss the fact that they've poured more hours than anybody else they know into that one thing, right?
Yeah, we like to say that the beauty of being an entrepreneur is you get to choose when you work your 80 hours every week.
Yeah.
You get to choose those 80 hours.
Yeah. But you gotta do it. You gotta pay the Pied Piper.
But if you love what you're doing, it's exciting. You have to love problem solving. And there's kind of a myth that entrepreneurs are huge risk takers. They'll bet their house and the farm and their cars and their family. And we haven't found that to be true. The successful entrepreneurs take very well calculated risks. They test and vet the model. They prove it before they scale. They have success being small before they dream about being big. They're quite methodical, and they take their idea through a series of hurdles to prove it and actually produce sales to vet it. And it's easy to scale something that's working.
Yeah.
They're smart people. They're not just, big, gigantic risk takers that don't care if they lose everything.
Can you tell me about an introverted entrepreneur that you know? Really successful, but not the typical silver-tongued or smart, tall, good-looking. There's somebody who'd rather not be seen, but they've been very successful.
Okay, those people, I believe, are only successful if they have a team with someone on it that is the salesperson. And we tell our students that if you don't like sales, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur, because you're selling your concept to investors. You're selling your concept to suppliers. You're selling your concept to your board members. You're selling your concept to your public, your buyers. And you have to be out in front of people, and you have to be able to talk and communicate about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and why you're passionate about it, and why it's better than the next guy. And, the tinkers and vendors in garages that come up with cool technology, they have to build a team around them where someone has that skill set, or the business will never go anywhere.
When we're talking about what's being taught in universities, what are some of the things that you've noticed that weren't being taught about business, or that was being taught and is entirely off?
Well, I don't think this is entirely off, but one of the things that we have seen at Centers for Entrepreneurship is the gold standard is get a piece of technology, prove it, get venture capital, scale it, go public, make millions of dollars. They hold that up as the gold standard, kind of the Wall Street model. Hardly anyone does that. I think you have a better chance of playing football in the NFL than building one of those kinds of companies.
Sure.
It's like 1% of 1%. And yet they hold that up as the gold standard, and they don't want to work with someone that wants to create a window washing business or buy a franchise or start a digital media consulting firm or a garbage company or whatever. And those are Main Street businesses. 99% of the businesses in America are considered small businesses by the SBA. And so our approach, rather than, we'd love to get some unicorns. We'd love to get some technology going. We'd love to see someone go public and build some unicorns. But the reality is our students want to build companies that can take care of themselves and their families. And they might be 1 million or 5 million or 10 million. And we've built a lot of those. And so those are what we call Main Street businesses. And when we decided what the focus of our center would be, we decided that we would cater to the kinds of businesses people build in America. And we would talk about the gold standard and venture capital and going public, but we'd be honest about the probability of taking a company there. And so we don't really promote that as the main emphasis of our center. We promote what kind of businesses do you want to start, and how can we help you build one of those?
What do you do to develop the character of the people as a part of the program, to teach them the right values, good morals, and the right principles that will help them to do business the right way?
Well, honesty, integrity are absolutely critical. You have to not only tell the truth, you can't exaggerate, you can't oversell, you can't misrepresent, or you will be quickly discovered, and you won't have opportunities once people find out that they can't trust you. But you also have to get back to people when they call. You have to be able to answer phone calls. They have to perceive you to be responsible and attentive and willing to take counsel. And so we teach that in all of our classes. The other thing that has become more and more important that we've talked about is that emotional well-being has now been shown to be a critical factor in career success, job success, building a new business. And so we've added that to our program, a kind of a happiness wellness project that we're working on the whole individual. We used to think that if you were successful, you'd be happy. So if you get a good degree, you'll be happy. If you get a good job, you'll be happy. If you have a good family, if you have a nice car and a nice house. And the more recent research shows that's just not the case, that, at best it's a fuzzy link and at worst it doesn't exist. And rather, emotional well-being, happiness, and good human relations skills are a bigger factor that drive career success and success in building and growing companies. And so we put more emphasis on that side of the character of our entrepreneurs.
I think a lot of students would be tempted, especially if they're in entrepreneurship, they're hungry, they're ambitious. They may look at a class like that about emotional well-being and say, well, okay, well, I obviously don't need that class. If you were to hear that from a student, what would you say to them?
We've been teaching this class. It's called Happiness in Your Life and Career for 2 years, and we've had hundreds of students go through it. And I haven't ever had a student say, I'm too busy being an entrepreneur to take that class. They know that, we market it pretty well and say, this is, emotional well-being is critical to your success in your career. And a lot of them are struggling. About a third of college students struggle with anxiety and depression and one form of emotional illness or another. And so they're just attracted to the course.
What do the students develop as a part of that course, and what do you hope that they leave with after taking that?
So the cool thing about the course is they have to implement the principles that are taught. It's part of the grade. So we teach them some basic principles for human happiness that have been vetted through research in positive psychology and other fields. And then they have to go out and practice those principles all week long. So getting up in the morning and rather than thinking me, and looking in the mirror, hey, am I handsome? Is my hair right? Do I have the right clothes? They think, hey, I'm going to go out and see if I can do some good and help some people in the world. And so they're other oriented, and they have to go out and do 3 good deeds every day and write about that. That's part of the grade. And then they have to keep a gratitude journal and focus, what was good about today as opposed to what was bad about today.
Yeah. And
that impacts their brain chemistry, basically, an attitude of gratitude. Then they have to be generous. They have to go out and share some of their resources that, we say, go through your closet, anything you haven't used for 10 years, a year or 2 years, go give it away to someone and don't drop it off at Goodwill. Go find someone that needs that. And so they're starting to share. They have to do things like that. They have to look at their anger and their grudges and see if they can let go of some of those against someone or something. So they're practicing the principles. And we have them take an emotional health survey week 1 and then retake it week 14 at the end of the course. And the scores go up significantly because they're practicing the skills of happiness and emotional well-being. And our hope is that, later in their life, if they dip down into a state of despair or depression, they'll remember that I quit doing those things that I learned in that class.
Yeah.
So they're simple things. They're not new things, but we just don't do them.
For sure. Well, to put them as a part of a curriculum like that's a really special thing. It's so unique. I don't know if you'll find that in many places, but that's probably one of the highest value exercises that you could participate in, even if it was just to experience it and so that you have a memory of how those things felt that you can draw back on later in your career. Why is there such an epidemic of this anxiety and depression and this fear and uncertainty in young professionals? Where does that come from?
There's a lot of factors. The economy is tough. The cost of housing is, prohibitive. You used to be able to graduate from college and your income and your first job would allow you to buy a house.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore. Buying cars is tough. Getting jobs is difficult. Some industries are going away. But I think the main reason is the experts we've interviewed attribute it to technology, social media. The way we communicate has changed. Like when I grew up, we had a gang or a posse of friends in the neighborhood. We'd go out and play games at night, and we'd go out to dinner, and we'd go to games together.
Yeah.
We had each other's backs, and we were friends, and we'd laugh a lot. And now, if your friends are mostly on social media, they're superficial friends. They're not intimate, deep friendships. And as human beings, we're social creatures. We need other humans to be happy. We need to have relationships that are positive, that we look forward to, and those are kind of going away, and they're being traded for these superficial online likes and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the latest studies show that high school students, 25% of them say they don't have a single friend, and about half
Really?
of college students say they're lonely a lot of the time. And so the new way that we interact isn't satisfying our needs as humans to be part of something. And so somehow we have to use all the cool things about social media and, artificial intelligence, robotics. We have to figure out how to use those effectively, but restore the kinds of relationships we all used to grow up with. And there's a fascinating study done at Harvard University. It was done over 84 years, and they looked at 3 generations of individuals, and they did emotional wellness exams. They did physical exams over 3 generations. And then in the end, they concluded the main thing that led to happiness, that distinguished the happy subjects from the unhappy participants, was positive relationships. That was the main thing.
What role does a mentor play in helping to alleviate that?
I think having mentors is really important in life to help you navigate challenges. We're wise if we learn from our own mistakes, but we're, I think, wiser if we learn from the mistakes of others. And so having mentors helps a lot. But, those deep friendships are really critical, and we have to be intentional about those. One of the things the students do in this program is they identify 5 individuals other than family members that they want to have stronger relationships with. They evaluate the quality of that relationship and then create some objectives to go and strengthen those relationships from, or 2 or 3 on the scale up to a 5. And they start realizing, I don't do very much to build intimate relationships anymore. And when they start doing that, they realize that this is better. I feel happier when I'm connecting with people and serving people.
Yeah. So if that's something that the new generation of young professionals is struggling with, making connections, intimate relationships, and having a relationship focus, so to say, what would be on the other side of that coin, something that they are particularly great at that's distinctive about this new generation?
One thing that's really awesome about this generation is they know these new technologies way better than I do, way better than my generation. My grandkids know it better than I do. And so they can use that in positive ways to create, we have a lot of students that have created social media consulting firms, and they're working with older people, older business owners,
building websites
and getting them on various formats and collecting content and writing content, and they know where to place the content. And they're really good at that. So understanding technology, and they're going to become experts at, understanding AI, and they're going to know how to use that effectively. And there was a conference down in Salt Lake City about AI in business, and one of the professors at Utah State was there, and he said that the young kids in our data analytics program were giving advice to these business owners about AI and about technology and social media those owners knew nothing about.
Yeah. One of the things that I've also noticed that's been more difficult, and I think it's because of the more fast-paced nature of industry and of jobs. For example, even when my parents were growing up, but especially my grandparents, it was great to find a good job and then stay at that company for decades. It was just very common, and it was also a really reputable kind of a thing to do. My dad's an artist, so he's never necessarily been working at jobs for long periods of time, but he's stayed in his same industry and craft his entire career. Well, nowadays it's so much more common to see people hopping jobs, jumping industries, or working a job and having a side project or a side hustle, or working a day job while building a business on the side. It can get easy to lose the perspective that comes from having a long-term vision or even long-term goals. And some are a little more applicable than others. Sometimes it's better to have a long-term vision here, but to have smaller bite-sized action steps on the side, or vice versa. You hear some conflicting advice like, it's better to fail fast and to fail cheap versus slow and steady wins the race. How would you counsel somebody to think about the long-term versus the short-term when it comes to building their career?
Well, I'm of course biased because I'm an entrepreneur and I run an entrepreneurship center.
Yeah.
But I think the skills of entrepreneurial leadership are going to be the most critical skills. I was in a conference yesterday all day long, and the message was that if our students can't become really skilled at problem solving, at innovation, problem solving, and value creation, they're not going to survive. And that's what we teach in the Center for Entrepreneurship. And there's some interesting studies. The Oxford University did a study. They looked at, a variety of industries and the displacement of jobs due to technology. And their prediction is that 47% of all professions today will be gone by 2034. They'll be replaced by robotics, or by delivery drones, or self-driving cars, or artificial intelligence, or new softwares, or whatever. And so a lot of people are frightened, saying, hey, we'll all be unemployed. But that's not the case. We continue to create new industries. We
Yeah.
continue to create new services and new products. We're an innovative nation, but the skill set that is going to be required is very different. I think the most successful people in the future will be able to identify problems, will be able to come up with unique and creative solutions, and will be able to add value to individuals, groups, and communities. And you can do that in an existing company. You can do that in a nonprofit organization. You can do that in your own business.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're huge fans of entrepreneurship as the new leadership model to be able to innovate and problem solve and add value.
Do you feel like that's really the only option moving forward? Is being entrepreneurial in some way is one of the only ways to stay viable?
Well, I think that you don't have to be an entrepreneur, but you have to have that skill set, regardless of where you work. If you work for a corporation throughout your entire career, and you're able to create new divisions, new services, new products, you're going to be a hero. I've had the CEOs and founders and CEOs of several billion-dollar companies tell me that if they don't reinvent themselves, they will be obsolete in 5 years. There are some careers that obviously, if you know a lot about big data-based management, and a lot about app development, and some of those skills are going to be around for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I think all the human services skills, hospitals, doctors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, we're going to still need, people that help us with people issues.
Is it possible to design your life around the thing that you're doing? Like, you've given examples of people who they've moved even out of the state where they're doing business, but they're able to kind of make it work, and they've been really intentional about how they've built their life around their entrepreneurial venture. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody who's wanting to craft their own life in a similar way, where they're a little more in control, they're at least living in the place where they want to live, doing the thing that they want to do, but being creative in how they get the job done?
Well, that's what we spent a year doing research on. Is we went to small towns across America where there were no jobs, but people went there for lifestyle. And they thought, okay, how do I stay here? There's no jobs. I've got to create my own job. And so we documented how they created jobs where there were no jobs that they loved doing, that were viable, that became regional and even national companies. And there's just a set of practices, that you have to implement to build a successful company. And if you learn those practices and you implement them, and your idea gets through these hurdles, we say if you launch an idea, it'll fail, but if you launch a true business opportunity, it will succeed. And we have 5 hurdles you take ideas through to vet them. And if you keep doing that and you vet those, and in the end, you vet them with sales, people want to pay money for what you're doing.
Yeah. Then
you build it, and then you see where it goes, and then you pivot, and maybe you sell it, and then you have some capital to build your next venture. And
yeah.
So that's, I think what people need to learn to do.
Yeah, sometimes it's about it's clearing the hurdles, getting to the point where you can afford to do that, right?
Yeah,
paying the price up front. People have a lot of different ways of saying it,
but I think there's going to be a lot of new opportunities to bring humans together in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
So, for example, there was a book called Megatrends published in the 1980s, and he predicted that technology would basically take over our lives, and there would be a backlash, a human backlash to the fact that we were just using technology to live, that people would still figure out ways. It would be a human backlash to the technology that the world was producing. And there'd be opportunities for creating groups and organizations and associations and adventure travel and things humans do. There'll be opportunities to do that, do things that bring people together in meaningful ways.
I've noticed a lot of businesses have been made recently where it's all about community, bringing real people together to have either real conversations or real experiences, or to, I don't know, just to be a part of something that's not run by
it's a soft
AI.
touch backlash to high tech.
Yeah, I think that's such a good thing. I wanted to ask you 2 closing questions before we finish. The first would be, if you could go back to talk with Mike Glauser in those early entrepreneurial days, late 20s, early 30s, what would be the most important advice that you would give him to assure him of his path and of his future?
I feel incredibly blessed that everything that I've been able to do, I would do again. I wanted to be a teacher. That was really, really important to me. I wanted to be a professor and a mentor and convey sound principles and help other people. I also loved building things. I wanted to build some things, and I've been able to do that, build some companies and sell some companies. And but my advice to others would be, educate yourself really well and become good at what you do. Education does make a big difference. Well, obviously, I'm a university professor, and you don't have to have it to build a company or be successful. There are a lot of successful people that don't finish college or go to college. But I think it really helps you build a network. It helps you learn how to solve problems. It helps you learn how to gain knowledge and where to find knowledge. And it shows other people that you are committed to improve yourself. Mm-hmm. So get a great education in a field you love. Learn it well, do it really well, continually look for opportunities. What are some problems you're facing as a consumer? Can you do it better? Can you fix things? Can you improve things? And when you find those opportunities, go for them.
Yeah.
And, balance starting something new with earning money. So many people I know have built great companies while they were still working, and they were honest with their employers. Hey, I'm building this company, but I'm doing it on the weekends, and it won't interfere with my work. And just keep testing ideas. And when you find one that you can vet well, go for it. Test it, prove it. And when it starts earning enough money, maybe to match your salary or close to it, jump into it and build it and go with it. See what happens. It's very exciting.
My final question is, what's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
Oh, I've had so many incredible mentors that have given me hours and hours of their time and advice, board members and partners. But something that just happened recently, this was really touching to me. I told my sons when I get close to retirement, I'm going to buy a really nice guitar and start playing music again. And so on my birthday, they surprised me, and they all went in and bought me a Gibson Hummingbird guitar, which is the dream guitar that I've always wanted. And coming from my own kids, it was just really, really meaningful.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has
Absolutely.
been phenomenal.
It's great talking to you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast on Instagram at the handle Momentum Theory Pod, where I'll be announcing new episodes weekly, as well as sharing my top takeaways from every conversation. As always, I invite you to please share this episode with anyone you think could benefit from the conversation. So long for now, and thank you for tuning in.